Thank you very much. The next item of business is a statement by Fiona Hislop on COVID-19 and the economy. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. I call on Fiona Hislop, Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we know that as well as being a public health crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic is also an economic crisis. And I have real sympathy for those who have had to close their businesses or have lost their jobs. And I understand the need to carefully get our economy moving again. Our route map sets out a phased approach to lifting lockdown measures to give people and business time to prepare to begin the process of restarting. I want to provide more details on our plan for restart and our wider recovery today. Our economic response has been defined by 4 phases: response, reset, restart and recovery. Our initial response has been focused on protecting lives, critical services, businesses and household incomes, and our economic interventions so far have been significant. We have set out a unique package of business support of over £2.3 billion to reflect the specific needs of our economy. This includes rate relief measures, hardship funds and grants for specific sectors like small business, retail, hospitality and leisure and seafood and fisheries. This support is getting to those who need it under the Business Grants Funding Scheme. By 19th of May, that was last week, local authorities had worked hard to pay out almost 65,000 grants, with more than £741 million distributed to support Scottish businesses. We know recovery for some sectors like tourism will be extremely challenging, and Fergus Ewing is leading Scottish Government activity to seek more financial support and to work with the sector to steer and plan for reopening. I can announce today that we will extend the eligibility of the current small business and retail hospitality and leisure grant to businesses that occupy multiple premises with a cumulative value above £51,000, and also to businesses occupying premises such as shared office spaces, business incubators and shared industrial units where the landlord is the ratepayer. We are also working with local authorities to support small business who aren't on the rates system and were not eligible to apply to the hardship scheme solely because they did not have a business bank account. Further detail on these arrangements will be set out later this week. Moving beyond that initial response, we have work to reset, including work to clear the supply chain blockages we experienced at the beginning of the crisis. This has laid the groundwork for us to begin to restart the economy. The sacrifices we are all making are having an impact, but the margins for controlling the virus are tight. Our economic restart must be safe and should be built around 3 pillars. Successful measures to suppress the virus. Secondly, guidance that supports fair and safe workplaces and sectors. And thirdly, the right structures for workplace regulation. On our measures to suppress the virus, today the First Minister announced that Test and Protect will be rolled out across health boards. This will include publication of guidance for those self-isolating and for employers. Clear guidance and regulation are essential to provide confidence to workers, employers and customers that workplaces are safe. Guidance produced recently by the UK Government will be helpful, however, it only goes so far. That is why we are developing sector-specific workplace guidance. Reflecting the diverse nature of our businesses, our guidance is being developed through a number of different routes. Some industries have already published guidance, while others are still in development. Ministers across government working in partnership with industry, trade unions and regulators to prioritise activity based on the phasing set out in the route map. We are currently working with around 14 sectors. We will publish guidance sector by sector in the coming days and weeks, and I am pleased to begin that process today with the publication of guidance on manufacturing and retail. This guidance draws on the experiences of businesses who have responded magnificently so far to provide essential equipment and services needed in this crisis, while maintaining safe workplaces. Both are excellent examples of how business, trade unions and regulators have shown collective leadership to create the right environment to protect workers and customers as we learn to live and work in the new normal. These should be considered alongside education and transport guidance, also published today, which are critical aspects of how people are able to work. This will be followed by more sectoral guidance later this week, including construction, where we have been working closely with the sector to agree a carefully planned approach. Guidance on its own will not create safe working environments. We are also working closely with the key enforcement agencies, the Health and Safety Executive, local authorities and the police, to ensure a joined-up approach to the enforcement and monitoring of workplace public health measures. I can announce today the publication of a joint statement that sets out how these bodies will work together to ensure workplaces operate safely and in compliance with the new regulation. As the statement also sets out, it is essential that employers carry out a COVID-19 risk assessment and that these should be developed, where possible, together with union health and safety representatives. Working together, employers, workers, unions and the regulatory bodies, we can create safe workplaces for all. It is also vital that we ensure that there is a clear public health advice service for businesses. We are collaborating with Public Health Scotland to enhance their Healthy Working Lives service, which will provide SMEs in particular with the advice and support they need to implement safe working arrangements. I will continue to take the steps necessary to build capacity across the system to ensure workers and consumers have the confidence to return to safe workplaces. As more parts of the economy restart, we will be putting our fair work principles at the heart of everything we are doing, reflecting our joint statement with the STUC, and we will review these principles throughout the recovery phases to ensure that they respond and adapt accordingly. I want to continue to work with employers to ensure workers are treated fairly where they are shielded or managing childcare as the schools transition. And through this, it is essential that we understand the impact of the crisis on equalities groups and particularly on women. Our recovery is about looking forward and preparing our economy for a post-COVID future. Our aim is not just to get back to where we were. We will need a revolution in economic thinking that stimulates and values cooperative sharing of risk and reward. A revolution in approach that rethinks what value is and where old thinking of battling over wealth distribution, which is never properly delivered, is replaced by collective endeavour. The time of a well-being economy has well and truly arrived. A time where creative thinking about wage subsidies can be seen as generators of innovation and change. We must be brave and bold and rethink the world of work and how we can work productively. We must think differently about remote working in geographic as well as workplace terms. We must look to a new future which accelerates a green recovery, and we will press the UK Government on transmission, carbon capture, storage and other critical issues. I want to explore ways to advance energy transition measures for the North East in particular, with a major focus on domestic manufacture and supply chains. Working to build resilience into all that we do, to meet and manage domestic demand, and putting innovation, technology and advanced manufacturing at the heart of our new Futures Industrial Plan. Our recovery will be an opportunity to renew our economy and build our resilience and future prosperity. We have seen an innovative and compassionate response from all parts of Scotland. By harnessing the innovation, skills and strengths of our businesses and people, we can ensure Scotland can thrive and compete in the future, and that our recovery is inclusive. I understand the impact of this crisis on those who have lost their jobs. I know the impact will be greater for those who have traditionally faced barriers in the labour market, and we will provide continued support to these groups to ensure no one is left behind. Presiding Officer, we will support people to retrain and reskill into good, sustainable jobs as the economy begins to grow again. To make the most of the skills and expertise we have, like in the oil and gas industry, to lead the way towards clean energy and technology, like hydrogen and carbon capture and storage. And we will support businesses to innovate and adapt their business models, embedding the use of data and new technology to meet changing demands and to access growing global markets for more sustainable goods and services. We will continue to seek the advice of experts, including the Independent Advisory Group on Economic Recovery, as we set our path to renewal. And we will engage, learn and collaborate with other countries, including the group of wellbeing economy governments with whom we share values and purpose. Presiding Officer, setting this clear direction to where we want to get to and working together with employers, peoples and places will be key to ensuring that we don't just recover from the impacts of COVID, but build back a better economy that is more resilient and able to thrive in the future.
Thank you very much. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement. I intend to allow around 35 minutes for questions, after which we will move on to the next item of business. As always, succinct questions and answers will be appreciated, and it would be helpful if members who wish to ask a question were to press their request to speak buttons now. And I call on Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. As the number of deaths thankfully declines, the economic challenge we face shows no sign of abating. Indeed, many businesses and local authorities are in desperate circumstances. I welcome the remarks in the statement regarding the extension of the criteria to cover multiple premises and those in shared spaces where the landlord is the ratepayer. Yet we saw reports just yesterday that despite the SNP promising to pass on £155 million in funding to Council, there is still no word on it actually happening. Many will now face funding black holes of tens of millions of pounds by the end of June. Then there is the concern that the SNP are putting Scottish businesses at a disadvantage by not allowing them to reopen alongside English firms. Construction is the obvious example, with the Housing Minister refusing to say when the sector can get going again. But other sectors, manufacturing for example, will be suffering too, potentially losing out on contracts to firms south of the border. The SNP have a duty to provide Scottish businesses with the support they need while they're forced to stay closed. The latest figures show that this isn't happening. 16,500 applications and £458 million outstanding. To make matters worse, more than 2 months into this crisis, there is still confusion and disparity over which businesses qualify for support. The Cabinet Secretary said in relation to business grants that support is getting to those who need it, yet some dentists and garages are receiving grants whilst others are being excluded. It is a postcode lottery. Will the Cabinet Secretary give clarity and provide a level playing field to those businesses?
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
It would have been helpful had Maurice Golden done his homework before he came. Of course, the £155 million, which is for councils, which is not part of the business support or the economy that we're discussing just now, that funding has already been paid, and he should know that before coming to this chamber. Can I say in relation to the important point about supporting businesses, both the Scottish Government and the UK Government have had to move swiftly to help support businesses. There have been schemes that have been set up in a matter of weeks, but because they have been swift, they've also been simple. So both in the rest of the UK and in Scotland, those businesses, for example, that don't have a business bank account, primarily concerns around payment into personal bank accounts is about making sure that there isn't fraud. These are things that are shared across the UK in terms of challenges. But we are working very hard with our local authority partners to deliver this. Now, he wants to have the same level playing field across all local authorities, but at the same time, in this chamber, we also have opposition members, including the Conservatives, saying we have to respect the autonomy and the independent decision-making of local authorities in a whole host of different areas. Now, we're providing them with guidance. Kate Forbes, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, will provide further guidance on the announcements I've made today, which will be very welcome. And can I say that it's also in response to people in this chamber. We've had Claire Adamson and Linda Fabiani arguing about and putting forward the case for extension of grants to shared office spaces. Alex Cole-Hamilton and Andy Whiteman in the coronavirus bill last week made these points. And around businesses continuing to get hardship grant support if they don't have that business bank account. Angus MacDonald and Liam MacArthur have made these points. Many businesses have made those points directly to us. But you cannot attack us for being responsive when we can try and get a bit of opportunity to move and tack and change what we're doing to roll out even more grants. The UK government is adapting its schemes. It's done it on CBILS, it's done it on job retention. We're doing the same things because we are wanting to help as many businesses as possible. But with a bit of good grace, with a bit of focus, we can make sure that as many businesses can get support, but we are going to have to move to the future in doing so. So we will use all the resources that we have to meet the specific needs of the Scottish economy. And I really hope MSPs get behind not just what we're putting forward today, but the businesses in their own constituency so they can get back and make sure that they can do so safely. You know our phasing report has been well received. You'll have seen, in example, the opinion polls are showing that people do have faith in the Scottish Government and they have got real concerns about the leadership that's happening elsewhere. But my job just now, our job just now, is to have a phased route map that will lead us to a direction. And if you do talk to manufacturing companies, if you do talk to other companies that are not necessarily in phase one but can start preparing from phase one when we get the green light, I hope, on Thursday, they want a lead-in time to prepare their supply chains to make sure that when they do return, the big challenge is not whether they can return in terms of how they can set up their business, is how they can do that profitably. And that's the biggest challenge. And let's get behind our business, make sure it can work safely, and to make sure that we can have incomes for individuals, businesses and society going forward.
I call Richard Leonard.
Presiding Officer, and can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of her statement. At the weekend, the Cabinet Secretary said that the Scottish Government's route map for business and the economy was plain as day. And today she has called for, if I think I heard her correctly, a revolution in economic thinking. So perhaps the Cabinet Secretary can tell us what the difference is between Boris Johnson's mantra, if you can't work from home, go out to work, and the First Minister's statement to this Parliament last week, when she also said, we will, and I quote, focus first on industries where people simply can't work from home. What is the plain as day, what is the revolutionary difference between the First Minister and the Prime Minister's return to work policy? And does it mean that all the industries, all the factories, all the offices across Scotland must reopen where people can't work from home, or just some of them? And can the Cabinet Secretary, who mentioned the construction industry, tell us about the guidance which is coming out later this week? What steps are contained in that guidance to ensure that workers in the construction industry who raise health and safety concerns when they return to work will not face the threat of blacklisting if they do?
Fiona Hislop.
There are many points in that question. Can I be absolutely clear that we expect home working to continue, and indeed for the majority of people that will still be the case, and that will be the case as we continue. We heard from the Transport Secretary that actually in terms of the capacity that would be a demand anyway, but we think from a safety point of view the more people can work from home, the safer it will be for those few people that do have to go and restart in terms of some of the initial industries can do so in a transport system that is safe. So this is an integrated response. It's also about recognising that people will be working from home because of childcare responsibilities and other areas. But I want to emphasise this is quite a clear difference from what the UK government has said from the start. They have said from the start, if you can't go from work, if you can, if you can't work from home, you should be working. That isn't our position at all. And in setting out the phases, we've been quite clear that, for example, in phase 2, non-essential indoor, non-office-based workplaces, factories, etc., should resume with the relevant guidance agreed. Now, manufacturing we've done today, we've worked very, very closely with the trade union in doing so, because we think that's really important in terms of making sure people have confidence, that they can have confidence that trade unions and employers have come together in that sector-by-sector guidance. But he raised a very important point about the advice and the compliance issues, which are really critical to ensuring continuing safety. And that is why the third pillar of what I've announced today is that joint statement between the HSC, local authorities and also police. We have to build the capacity in that. And there are very welcome statements that have been supported by trade unions in that particular element of my announcement today. So I think the points about construction are are well made. I think you'll find in terms of the construction guidance and indeed that third pillar I've talked about today, that recognising the rights of people, and indeed it is in law that people should be able to go to work and have make sure that they can't go to work where they feel unsafe. And so therefore it really is incumbent on all of us to set out what those issues are, and that's why we're providing both the guidance this week but also that advice, compliance and enforcement regime as well.
Thank you. I now call Patrick Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for the advance copy of the statement. I'm certainly pleased that there's progress on meeting the needs of small independent businesses who are not themselves ratepayers, who pay their rates through a landlord. But I'm a bit confused at the comments about the gathering in of expert information and advice. The Government and the Cabinet Secretary mentions the Advisory Group on Economic Recovery, which is leading the work on some of these important questions about how we recover. But the Government also separately has a Sustainable Renewal Advisory Group, which appears to have no overlap in the membership of these two advisory groups. So will these two groups be working to a shared agenda? Will they be working completely separately in different silos, as though sustainability is something separate from economic recovery? And how will the Government ensure that there is some kind of coherence when you have these separate advisory groups, each working to different ministers, talking about the economic recovery in different terms?
Fiona Hislop.
I think the member makes a very important point, and I will try and address it directly. Clearly, the shared agenda I've set out is about sustainable economic recovery. In terms, therefore, of the focus of both the advisory group and indeed the sustainable existing continuing sustainability groups, there will be a shared agenda. There is an access for ministers from both these groups, and there is coordination between these groups, and indeed they are directly corresponding with each other. But of course, advisory groups advise and ministers decide. And I hope there'll be an opportunity also within the Parliament to debate some of these issues when we get to the stage of publication of ideas. I work extremely closely with Rosanna Cunningham. We have a shared agenda, and indeed also with Michael Matheson for some of the issues, particularly around infrastructure and transport, which will be part of that sustainability agenda. So I can assure you that we want to work to a similar agenda. It's the same agenda, and we will make sure in terms of access that there is direct access both by ministers but also groups. And I know, for example, the advisory group is having extensive discussion with those that are involved in the renewable sector, and particularly the groups that Rosanna Cunningham is working with as well. And Rosanna Cunningham is having direct discussions with the Economic Advisory Group as well.
Thank you very much. Willie Riley.
The Health and Safety Executive, the local councils and the police have an important role in refereeing complaints and concerns on whether the workplace is safe. But they only have powers from the 1974 Act and on physical distancing in the emergency powers. They do not have the power to close any business only on the basis of them being non-essential. So how do we avoid workplace conflict if these referees do not have these powers to enforce the Scottish Government's guidance? And can the Cabinet Secretary also update the Chamber on her discussions with the Chancellor on implementing a universal basic income to help people who have been left behind, left out of the various UK and Scottish Government financial support mechanisms?
Cabinet Secretary.
On that latter point, we obviously have great interest in the universal basic income. I have not directly spoken to the Chancellor, but I would intend to do so part of the recovery. But obviously that's been a case that's been put forward by other ministers as well. In relation to the policing of the new physical distancing guidance, clearly there are powers within the existing regulations, as he mentions, for the police to do that, and they are doing that. If further regulations are required, we would certainly look to develop those and publish those. However, the statement that's been established today is recognising that the issues that we are facing should be and can be dealt with by existing legislation. That's the strong view of the HSC and local authorities. And so therefore it's actually about compliance and policing within those both existing regulations and physical distancing. But remember, the powers of the HSE are quite extensive, so therefore applying it to this new I suppose, experience that we're all in will give the more strength. So this is an area of appeal, I said, that we have to develop more capacity in, and we'll continue to do so, because as we live with COVID, because unfortunately that's going to be the case, as we roll out different sectors of the economy, more and more workplaces are going to have to comply, and certainly they want to give their customers confidence that they're doing so. So that's a critical element, and I'm glad he's focused on that in his questioning.
Thank you. Angela Constance, to be followed by Donald Cameron.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Meeting our statutory targets to end child poverty was always going to be challenging, and now more than ever we need an economy that works for everyone. And as we begin to look at life beyond lockdown and seek a new future, how will the Cabinet Secretary ensure that we do not just have a plan for economic recovery, but we also have a plan for economic resilience that may include ideas such as a job guarantee scheme, ensuring that in the future we cannot be blown off course when it comes to ending poverty and inequality and securing fair work?
Cabinet Secretary.
Resilience is a key aspect of how we will secure our future. I've referenced it several times in my statement. Of course, we need resilience in terms of global and local supply chains, but we also need resilience in our economy and our society more generally. And if we still have poverty and we still have inequality, that is not a resilient society. And I think that's one of the very strong, firm lessons of COVID, is that we can't afford a situation where those that suffer inequalities suffer most from the disease itself. So building that resilience is very much part of a well-being society. It's very much part of what we're trying to seek to do and will continue to do, and it's a very important point in raising it. She makes a very important point in raising it. I know that the member has a personal experience of driving forward the move to try and tackle youth unemployment. We had some experience over 10 years ago with the financial crisis. This crisis is on a completely different scale. But if we collectively agree that we want to ensure that our young people in particular do not suffer disproportionately, we will have to look at schemes and such as those that she mentions, but particularly in relation to job training, job subsidy for innovation and skills. We've done it before to some degree. We might have to think about it in a far bigger degree than we've ever done before.
Donald Cameron, to be followed by Maureen Watt.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware that at the weekend, the hotel and travel company Specialist Leisure Group went into administration, leading to closure of hotels across Scotland, including 3 in the Highlands and Islands, causing huge anxiety for their staff. Whilst additional support is welcome, does the Cabinet Secretary acknowledge the hospitality sector remains in very great danger of collapse? And can she outline what further measures the Scottish Government will take using its own resources for that sector?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for that question. He might not be aware, but during the topical questions this afternoon, the Tourism Secretary, Fergus Ewing, addressed those particular points. So I would refer the member and others to the answers given by Fergus Ewing in particular. But he does make an important point about the importance of tourism, probably disproportionately to Scotland and the rest of the UK, which is why, in terms of our decision-making, we have specifically created schemes that do not exist anywhere else in the UK. The Creative Tourism and Hardship Fund is a unique fund to Scotland, and as we speak, tens of millions of pounds are being paid out to different sectors, but in particular to tourism, and also in the Pivotal Resilience Fund. These are schemes that are particular to Scotland because we know the need for those in particular. We do think that there will need to be additional and continuing support for tourism, and Fergus Ewing is carrying out work to identify where those resources might come from. Again, I mentioned that in my statement earlier on. I also think in terms of the job retention scheme, we need to look at ensuring that the UK Government makes decisions to have sector-by-sector analysis in terms of further extension from the October deadline, specifically for I think the tourism, hospitality, culture and heritage sectors that are impacted the most and will be also the longest, I think, before they return to full functioning. And also oil and gas for other particular areas. His points are well made, but I refer him to Fergus Ewing's answer earlier on as the Tourism Secretary.
Maureen Watt, to be followed by Jackie Bailey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And as you know, Cabinet Secretary, Aberdeen is suffering not just from the effects of COVID, and it was identified as being particularly hit by Brexit, but also the oil price crash, not to mention the stalling of the strategic projects such as Aberdeen Harbour. So can I ask what support is the Scottish Government making available to the North East of Scotland, and what representations has it made to the UK Government on behalf of the oil and gas industry in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
The situation facing the oil and gas sector is specific, but also, I think, very serious indeed. We understand from the Oil and Gas UK report that the direct and indirect jobs in the UK supported by an industry could decline by 25,000 to 30,000 over the next 12 to 18 months. We are working very closely with the UK Government on this issue. Paul Wheelhouse, the Energy Minister in particular, has had extensive discussions with the UK Energy Minister, Kwasi Kwarteng, and also he has spoken most recently on the 7th of May to the Strategic Leadership Group on Oil and Gas and Energy Transition. We are already supporting, will continue to support the North East in a number of ways. I know that my colleague Michael Matheson, the Transport Secretary, has engaged with Aberdeen Harbour in particular. There's big important issues that we need to work with them to ensure a confident future in that sector. I also have engaged myself with Minister Zahawi, the Minister in Bays is very acutely aware of those issues, and we want to coordinate the support that can be brought forward. I have also specifically asked my officials to accelerate the work that we were already carrying out on the North East, and in particular to see what step changes we can make in particular areas or transition, particularly into areas such as hydrogen and indeed other areas. And I've also engaged with One Aberdeen, the one organisation, because I think the plans they have actually look as if they can move fairly quickly. So again, we'll look at what we can bring forward, and again, we'll report to Parliament when we have got further detail.
Jackie Bailey, to be followed by Bruce Crawford.
Can I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's announcement of the extension of the Business Grant Scheme, because she is right to do this. There is currently £449 million unallocated. 1 in 5 of those applying have had their applications rejected, and with an overall fall in the number of grants being awarded, there is concern that businesses are losing out on much needed government support. So in that light, will the Cabinet Secretary reconsider the decision to limit businesses with multiple premises to 75% of grant, putting them at a competitive disadvantage to businesses in England who get 100% of grant? Given that £449 million is still unallocated, will she lift the cap and get desperately needed support out to struggling businesses?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think the member may have misinterpreted the amount that's available in terms of not being allocated, but we're happy to engage, and I can ask my colleague, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, to perhaps update her separately from that. One of the reasons that there are still issues in people applying for grants is there are still those that are still to make their application, and indeed, as we speak, there are people that are still making their application. We have extended the grants to those that have properties that have, they have multiple properties. But I would reinforce the point that I know, for example, there is a retail chain that is currently operating at 65%, as in they are still making money, that would under her scheme, receive even more funding when there are other areas and other types of businesses that are getting no funding. And the same company, as I've just referred to, is also potentially in receipt of UK funding of loans and also job retention schemes money for furloughed staff. So in many ways, and for a significant number of companies, they will get a better deal in Scotland than they will in the rest of the UK, precisely because we have a more generous small business bonus scheme. But if we're trying to be equitable, if we're trying to make sure we can support people, if we're going to have, as Donald Cameron has asked for, specific additional funding for the tourism industry, that is why we have to direct funds into the Pivotal Resilience Fund and the Creative and Tourism Hardship Fund. So she can argue to have more funds available for those who have already received funds, or we can direct the funds that we have available for those who have yet to receive anything. I think it's important that we support those companies who have yet to receive anything, rather than those that have already not just received funding for one property, but can do it for a number, and when other businesses are suffering. So it's about fairness and it's about equity, yes, but we have to respond to the distinct needs of Scotland, rather than necessarily copying those decisions or elsewhere, because if we copied what happened in the rest of the UK, we would not have that funding in the Resilience Fund, and we would not have that funding in the Hardship Fund.
Bruce Crawford, to be followed by Alexander Burnett.
Officer, can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for ensuring that financial support was made available to a great many businesses as quickly as possible because of COVID-19, and I very much welcome the extension announcements today. As the Cabinet Secretary herself has recognised, gaps and anomalies still remain. I wonder, therefore, if she could say more about the support for businesses such as businesses run from home who do not qualify for assistance from any government schemes, and those bed and breakfast operators who do not yet have a business bank account.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, these have been the most challenging in trying to seek support, and that's why the rate system was both used by ourselves and the UK Government in those initial tranches, reaching tens of thousands of small businesses. The evidence for those that are working from home, or indeed don't have business bank accounts, is more difficult to administer on a centralised basis. But that's why Kate Forbes will be working with local authorities to establish mechanisms by which those types of companies and those types of businesses, rather, can achieve access to grants, because they will have to provide some evidence, and that's why the issue of paying government or paying public money into personal bank accounts is very challenging indeed. But we know that's how certainly some bed and breakfast, for example, do operate their businesses. So therefore, that's why, for those businesses we tried the hardship fund, but there's still that issue. And I think it's about the integrity of the system in terms of avoiding fraud in particular. So we think the best way of doing that is with local authorities. We think with the experience of the self-employed scheme, the newly self-employed scheme, again, unique to Scotland, we've learned from that as a way that we can probably forge a path to ensure that those businesses that he's talked about can achieve funding. But again, this is about being agile, responsive. It might not be as swift as people would want it to be, but as we know, bed and breakfasts are going to be one of the last to open up in terms of the economy. And so therefore, even as of now, grant support will help them bridge that period until which they can open. And as we are on bed and breakfast and tourism, I'm not the tourism secretary, but I was for many years, and I really hope and I really want the people of Scotland to get behind Scotland's tourism industry and to make sure when they can, they book, they support our local industry, and they make sure that they visit not just places in Bruce Crawford's constituency, but elsewhere as part of our economic response and return.
Alexander Burnett, to be followed by Alex Riley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Now, the Cabinet Secretary mentions how she has given specific support for a number of sectors. However, constituents who have been unsuccessful in their applications, particularly to the Hospitality Fund, being given no feedback as to whether their application fails the criteria or simply requires additional information. So can I ask what the Cabinet Secretary can do to correct this and ensure that it is not repeated in the further support announced today?
Cabinet Secretary.
In terms of that feedback, I'm happy to share the response that we've received in relation to why people feel on a global scale when we get the relevant information. Some of it is because people have not provided the correct information. Some of it is because they don't have business bank accounts, which is a requirement of those schemes. But as he's heard, we're finding another way to ensure that we can help support that group in particular. I think his point about getting feedback is really important. There are criteria in terms of, for some of the funds, for example, they've had to experience 50% loss of income. This is not about income replacement. This is about hardship. As part of the response, there should be indications as to where people can find additional responses to help their businesses. For example, the business bounce back loan was actually announced after we'd established the Hardship and Resilience Fund. And for many companies, what they're looking for is a short-term cash flow. And therefore, the bounce back loan, which is very welcome, is again another source of income. But can I say that the oversubscription, because this is obviously a clear need, has meant that not everybody's needs can be met. So therefore, the criteria and the examination of particularly around the pivotal funds, the involvement of the South of Scotland and indeed Highland Islands agencies and Creative Scotland and the tourism body Visit Scotland has helped identify those pivotal companies that are vital to the recovery of not just sectors but regions and parts of Scotland as well.
Thank you very much. And to get more questioners in, please, succinct answers and succinct questions. Alex Rowley to be followed by Annabel Ewing.
Presiding Officer, the Trade Union Unite is arguing that the way out of this crisis is through major investment in growth, through taxing more those who can afford to pay more, and through unprecedented job creation schemes. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with that? And while she referenced oil and gas within her statement, there was no mention of offshore renewables. We have wind farms being created right round the coast of Scotland, with jobs going, I think, to every country but Scotland. Burnt Island, Methil, Stornoway, yards lying empty. Has the government given up on us getting jobs from the offshore wind renewable sector?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think if the member wants to reread my statement, I was specific about the green economic recovery and the importance of renewable technologies. I agree with him that I think this is an area that additional job creation is going to be vital. I do think we should be looking to bring forward things that we perhaps would have done on a longer term basis and to consider them in the shorter term. We are also looking across Cabinet at some of the infrastructure opportunities that we can bring forward. And again, in terms of that activity, we need to make sure that where it's required, we can retrain and reskill people. But there will be a situation, sadly, where people will be losing their jobs because of the economic crisis that we're in. Part of our responsibility is to ensure we can redeploy them in areas, and that would require government and state support in that particular area. In relation to offshore renewables, do I want to have a functioning competitive supply chain here in Scotland? The answer is absolutely yes. Do we have all the levers to do that? The answer is no. And therefore, we will try to persuade the UK government to relax some of the issues, particularly around some of those contracts, to allow us to be in a far more competitive space to ensure that domestic companies can achieve those contracts. But I also think resilience is a factor here, and shorter supply chains for international activity, I think, will be an imperative going forward, and I think should play, I hope, to Scotland's advantage in that renewables revolution.
Thank you very much. Annabel Ewing to be followed by Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Job Retention Scheme is playing an important part of the response in terms of areas covered by Westminster's reserved powers to the coronavirus pandemic, helping to mitigate unemployment and protect people's livelihoods. With different parts of the UK at different stages of lockdown, it is vital, therefore, that the scheme remains in place for as long as it is required in each of the devolved nations. Can the Cabinet Secretary provide an update on discussions with the UK Government to ensure that support under this scheme is not cut off prematurely for Scottish workers?
Cabinet Secretary.
As the member may be aware, together with Kate Forbes, we wrote a letter to the Chancellor on this specific issue. He has yet to reply. However, we wrote immediately before the announced extension of the job retention scheme from the end of June to October. I think that extension will support a large number of the companies that we're seeking to support. And I also think the flexibility that is going to be brought forward, although challenging from some areas, actually has been called for by those companies trying to have a slow restart and not employing all their staff, but keeping some on furlough as they gradually restart their businesses. So there are still challenges within that, and we will still press the UK Government, but they have responded to our request for both extension and also flexibility. However, I do think there will still be sectors that may need support beyond October, and I think that is the area, particularly around the areas of tourism, hospitality and heritage, as well as in relation to oil and gas. Those areas in particular, I think we need to look and see whether we can persuade them to have an extension in that area. They were responsive at the start of the job retention scheme, when clearly our medical advice was different and distinct than the rest of the UK for a short period of time. There's no reason to think why they wouldn't be flexible at the other end as we're coming out of that, but we'll enter those discussions in good faith, and will continue to press the case for the sectors in Scotland that we think will need support beyond October.
Murdo Fraser, to be followed by Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There are over 2,500 tourist businesses in Scotland who sit above the 51,000 rateable value threshold, and to date have received no grant support whatsoever. These are medium to larger businesses, which are the lifeblood of the industry, and major employers who have received zero income since lockdown started. Now, I welcome what the Cabinet Secretary had to say about extending the current grant to businesses occupying multiple premises with a cumulative value above 51,000. Will this also extend to those with a single premise above 51,000? And if not, why not?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm neither the Tourism Secretary or the Finance Secretary, but since the economy embraces all sectors, I will try and answer that question. I agree with him that that would be desirable if we can do that. Currently, we're not in a position to do that. It was one of the issues I did raise with the Chancellor, because at the time there was a really strong underutilisation of the UK Government's guarantee on the CBILS scheme. Now that's subsequently changed with the bounce back, and indeed it's interesting that the bounce back scheme probably has, for some banks, rapidly seen more applications than the original CBILS scheme. At the time I'd said to him that it would be, if they were undershooting, could they use the resources from the UK Government to extend the grant opportunities for those over 51,000, provide funding for that across the UK. Obviously, we'd have consequentials and be able to use it in that way. That hasn't been taken up just as of yet. On the one hand, people want us to be the same as the UK, and then on the other hand, they want us to do something different. We're trying to chart a course here, which is both fair and equitable, and precisely for the issues around the 51,000 plus tourism sector. That's one of the reasons to address that area. We set up the Hardship Fund and also the Pivotal Resilience Fund for companies to then apply to those two funds. There's obviously been a great deal of demand, but I know, for example, one of the companies that had concerns originally, the Selkirk Arms, has now had funding from this route, and as we speak, those funds are starting to deliver. It won't stop us impressing on the UK Government the need to provide more funding for the 51,000 plus. Whether they can do it or whether we can do it on a sector-by-sector basis, that's always problematic. But there may be an issue, particularly for tourism and hospitality, to do that. But I think I will try and maximise my opportunity for resource in making those decisions. But ultimately, it'll be Kate Forbes and Fergus Ewing who would take that forward.
And briefly, please, Claire Baker, to be followed, I hope, by a final remote contribution from Richard Lyle. Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last week, when the route map was published, Phase 3 is the earliest mention of the cultural sector, with suggestion of opening of museums, galleries and cinemas, and also live events with restricted numbers. The Cabinet Secretary knows performance is often preceded by the need for recording studios, access to rehearsal space and mobilisation of crews and technicians. Will there be a sectoral guidance that recognises the need for a phased recovery in the cultural sector that enables activity prior to Phase 3?
Cabinet Secretary.
The member raises an important point in relation to the culture side of the challenges that we face. In terms of certainty, I think people would like certainty so they can plan. We are establishing the guidance groups for the creative industry sector. So currently the discussions are how fragmented that they might be to reflect the different nature of different parts of our cultural heritage in relation to museums, galleries, but as she mentioned, studios in particular. So we are looking to develop guidance in these areas. But our point about trying to phase, it's a bit like the construction sector as well and these other areas, being able to plan in advance, because you can't just deliver a show or deliver a performance or deliver from a standing start. There is that lead-in, and so there's preparation work. So I hear what the member says, and in having that dialogue both with producers but also with unions that are involved and the different sectors themselves, we hope to be able to plan a very sensible phased return for that sector. But I hear what the member's saying in terms of trying to give some certainty. But as of now, when we haven't had the decision yet to move into phase one, we can't give that certainty of dates as of yet, but we know how important that is, in particular to those outlying sectors that might not be opening until phase 3.
Finally, and briefly please, Richard Lyle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I refer members to my register of interest. Cabinet Secretary, show people are part of Scotland's heritage and economy and have been hit hard by this crisis. They've been unable to run any fairs since the start of lockdown, therefore no income. Further to your announcement today, can you help showmen who are self-employed, do not have a rateable office, are not able to access any funding, and help them to get over this period? What further steps will the Scottish Government take to help show people who, and could you please look into their plight in light of your announcement today? Cabinet Secretary.
I know the member is a great champion of show people, and clearly they've been hit hard at this time, as indeed other sectors have involved in the leisure sector. I would hope that the relaxation and the changes that we've announced today and the new schemes to enable local authorities to support those businesses that don't have rateable property may help the sector that he's got an interest in particular. But I'm happy to defer to the Cabinet Secretary for Finance to correspond with the member to confirm whether that is the case.
That concludes questions on the statement. My apologies to Claudia Beamish and John Mason, who I was not able to call, and we will move on in a moment to the next item of business.